Hello, Pokemon trainers! Welcome to our first official Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield video on iStarly TV. There was a Nintendo Direct today, earlier this morning, very early in the morning, at least for those of us who live in the Pacific Coast. I had to wake up at 6 a.m., but anyways, so there was a lot of good information. They gave us a good amount of new information, but also they didn't give us, like, that much, which is fine. I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm fine with them kind of drip feeding us information for these games. They also announced a release date. I might do a couple different videos for this Nintendo Direct, or maybe I'll just do a longer one. Well, actually, I'll probably split it, but this first video, this main one, I really want to talk about kind of the designs for the new legendary Pokemon, which were, of course, revealed. The names for these legendaries, these are the box art legendaries, so the two legendary Pokemon that appear, respectively on Pokemon Sword and on Pokemon Shield, of course. So that's pretty cool, and they did reveal several new Pokemon as well. Now, including these two legendary Pokemon, they revealed a total of 7 new Pokemon from in this Nintendo Direct. So that's pretty cool. That's obviously not a whole lot of new Pokemon, but again, I think that's kind of good. That's normally how they do it. I remember for Pokemon Sun and Moon, they originally kind of revealed, the starters, of course, and then they revealed like Pikipek and Grubbin and Yungoos in one of their first announcements for the game. So they usually start with kind of the earlier game Pokemon that you can obtain, and then they very slowly start releasing more and more information and more Pokemon. So that's cool. Again, this is kind of what we expected from this Direct. Now, looking at these two legendaries, they are named Zacian or Zacian. Correct me, I don't remember how to pronounce it. I know he pronounced it in the video, and I see the name. When you look it up online, you can see the name. I do not 100% remember how to say it. I think it's Zacian, though. That's the Pokemon Sword legendary, I believe. And then Zamazenta. Be back. I'm actually going to double check on that. Okay, so it's Zacian and Zamazenta. So, cool Pokemon, cool names. I do like the designs for them, and I'm going to kind of guess the types for these two Pokemon, for these two legendaries. Now, first I want to talk about their designs. They do look very similar. They showed a little bit of a trailer, a mini trailer for these two legendary Pokemon, and it shows one of them first in like a forest setting, and then the other one kind of jumps in, and it looks like they're about to attack each other, but then it looks like they kind of hear something else, and then they're kind of like back to back and kind of looking around. It looks like something else is approaching. I thought they were also going to reveal the third legendary, because, of course, usually there are kind of 3 Pokemon. For example, you have Solgaleo and Lunala, and then the third is Necrozma, Groudon and Kyogre, and then there's Rayquaza. So I thought that they were going to actually reveal the third one, and that one was going to show up in the trailer. That didn't happen, though, and again, it makes sense that they're not going to reveal all of this information right away. But I just thought that trailer was interesting. Now, what I also found interesting in the trailer was, it was 6 a.m., so I was very, very tired, but I actually thought when the second one appeared that it was actually the same Pokemon, because they do look pretty similar. If you really look at them longer, obviously there are some big differences, but they're both quadrupedal Pokemon, which means that, they're 4-legged. But also very interesting, they have a very similar color scheme. They're both kind of blue-based, and they're both kind of like wolves. They look like wolves or some kind of, dog type of creature, I guess. Maybe lion-esque. But they're blue-based, and then they have kind of like this goldish, more yellowish, more dull yellow that represents their sword and their shield. And then, of course, they have like a striking, like either bright red or kind of more pale red. So I guess that's how they're distinguished, is that one of them is maybe more vibrant in color, while the other is maybe more pale or dull in color. But again, they do look somewhat similar, at least in that they're both wolves, and they're both 4-legged, and they both have a similar color scheme. So with that in mind, I think they're cool looking. I think they're very, very cool. They are somewhat reminiscent of previous legendaries, though. The Zacian, we're gonna call it, the sword one, I believe, that one reminds me a lot of Cobalion or Cobalion. which is a legendary trio Pokemon from 5th gen. It definitely looks a lot like that one. And then the shield one, I believe Zamazenta, reminds me a lot of like Solgaleo, a quadrupedal Pokemon that has like this kind of mane of goldish, reddish fur, I guess, or given that it's a shield Pokemon, it's a shield, so it's probably like armor of some sort. But that one definitely reminds me a lot of Solgaleo. So these Pokemon are really, really cool on their own, like in a vacuum, but when you do compare them to previous legendaries, they do feel familiar, I guess. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and guess these typings for these legendaries. The place where my mind immediately goes for both of them is Steel. Given that they have kind of, again, this kind of like armor on their bodies, that makes me think that they're Steel. But also, of course, they are representing a sword and a shield. The Zacian or the sword one actually has a sword in its mouth. So obviously that makes you think of, Steel, right? Or a Steel type. And also shields remind you of Steel as well. So I mean, that's the easy answer, and I honestly feel like they're gonna go that route, that these are both gonna be Steel type. But at the same time, probably not, to be honest, because rarely do they ever give us two legendary Pokemon or two box art legendaries that are the same exact type. They might have legendary Pokemon that share a type. So for example, Lugia and Ho-Oh are both flying types. For example, Palkia and Dialga are both dragons. But sometimes, they change things up, right? And if you think back to, Sun and Moon in particular, for Sun and Moon, Lunala was a very unique typing. It was Psychic and Ghost, which was, I think one of the first Psychic and Ghost types we've ever seen. And then Solgaleo was Psychic and Steel. I guess those two did share a type. They were both Psychic. But you think to X and Y, where we had Xerneas and Yveltal, and Xerneas was a Fairy type, while Yveltal was a Dark and Flying type. That was very different. And then of course you think to Ruby and Sapphire, where Groudon was a ground type and Kyogre was a water type. So in the past they have done it where they've given us different types for the legendaries, but again, I do think that there's a chance that there's some overlap between these two. Maybe these will both be Steel types with a secondary typing. Now as far as secondary typing, it's hard to kind of ignore what we've seen in the past with legendaries. If you think of the common types that legendary Pokemon normally have, you probably think of like Dragon and Psychic. I think those are probably the two most represented types of legendary Pokemon. The fact that these are quadrupedal does, of course, change a lot of what we think about them. I mean, they're not in the air, so I doubt that they're flying types. Nothing about either of these Pokemon hints at them being grass types at all. Maybe they could be water. Maybe one of them could be water types, since again their color scheme is very blue heavy, and that makes me think of someone like Keldeo, who is again a water type quadrupedal Pokemon, kind of similar to these. But again, I just can't ignore that I think that these Pokemon are very definitely Steel types in some way. But of course, I was talking to Dieter and I told him like maybe it's like a pure Steel typing, like just Steel, because that would be something different that we haven't seen from a legendary. But I highly doubt that both of them would just be pure Steel. And so I also don't think one would be pure Steel and then the other one would be dual type. So that again leads me to believe that they are both Steel types with a secondary type. I guess if I had to absolutely guess, maybe one of them could be Steel and Fighting. Maybe the sword Pokemon, Zacian, could be Steel and Fighting. Again, that just kind of really adds to the comparison to Cobalion, though, because it looks like Cobalion, and Cobalion is also a Steel and Fighting type. So I don't think that they would do that just because it looks so similar. If it did, that I think would get on a lot of people's nerves. I would find that to be lame if that was the case, but I would accept it. I think that's a lot of the case when they announce new things in Pokemon games. They announce new stuff, and at first I'm like, oh, that's kind of lame, but then I often just kind of learn to accept it and learn to actually like it and appreciate it. So if they were to make it a Steel and Fighting type, I would end up being okay with it. Steel and Water, I think there's a good chance one of them is Steel and Water. They do both look like they could be Steel and Water, so I'm just gonna guess that the Shield one is Steel and Water. Again, I would hope that it wouldn't be Steel and Psychic, although that does make a lot of sense. But if it were Steel and Psychic, that would be too similar to Solgaleo. So, yeah, there's a lot going on here. Maybe one is Steel and Fairy, but none of them look like they have anything to do with Fairy either. I know Xerneas exists. Xerneas is pure Fairy, and I don't know what about it makes it a Fairy, but that exists. But these look more, feral and maybe more aggressive than Xerneas. Xerneas kind of looks like calm if you look at its facial features, whereas these two actually look like angry or aggressive in some way, which leads me to believe that they're probably not fairy types. Who knows? But let me know in the comments what you think the typings of these Pokemon are. I'm really interested in knowing. But I'm going to guess, if you had to make me guess, I'm actually going to go the lame route and the safer route, and I'm going to say that Zacian, the sword Pokemon, is Steel and Fighting, and that Zamazenta and the shield Pokemon is Steel and Psychic. So if you had to, or if I absolutely had to have an answer, that would be my final answer. But again, I'm keeping my options open here. I think that water type is another one that's very possible with these two. Maybe rock type is also possible. I could see some of them, one or both of them, fitting into that category with rock type. I mean, nothing on them looks like rocky, so that probably cancels that, but who knows, right? Sudowoodo doesn't look like a rock at all, but it's a rock type. I mean, I don't think that they have anything to do with ice or fire or grass. Those are a lot more elemental types, or electric. I doubt either of them have to do with electric. Usually with those types, ice, fire, grass, electric, you can kind of tell something on the Pokemon makes it look like that type. Like electric Pokemon either have more jagged edges or have a lot of yellow on them or actually have literal like electricity looking things, and none of that occurs here. And same with fire types. Fire types are either a lot more orange or red, or they actually have literal fire on their bodies. So yeah, that's going to be my final guess. I think that's the safer guess. And then again, I think water and fairy and even ground could be other types that are possible here. But maybe normal. Who knows? I mean, we've never really had sure, we've had a normal legendary or two, but I don't think we've had too much representation of normal types. So once again, what do you think the typings for these Pokemon are? I'm really interested to hear your opinions. And again, my bottom line here is that I think these Pokemon are really cool, but it is unfortunate, in my opinion, that they look very reminiscent of previous legendary Pokemon that we've seen in the past. But at the end of the day, I think they're cool. Now, while we're on the topic, we'll just go ahead and talk about the typings for the other Pokemon that were revealed. I was going to make a video guessing the typings for all of the new Pokemon because I watched the Direct and I thought about the typings. I went back to sleep for an hour or two while thinking of the typings. And then it turns out that the Pokemon Company actually released the typings, I think, on their website. So the official typings for Wooloo, the little sheep Pokemon that was revealed, it's a pure normal type, which is what I thought. And then they also introduced, Gossifleur, which is the flower Pokemon, the grass type. It is an actual pure grass type, and it evolves into Eldegoss, which is also a pure grass type. So those Pokemon are cute. I like them, but they're also, again, very familiar. At this point, it's kind of hard. It's not hard. I think they make it hard to design grass type Pokemon. They make a lot of grass type Pokemon that just feel kind of bland and kind of familiar, which I agree these are. And then they revealed Dreadnought is a water and rock type. So that's also what I thought. I originally in my mind thought it was like a ground type, but I thought it could be a water type, and also it looked kind of rocky as well. So that's not surprising that it's a water and rock type. So that's kind of cool. And then finally, Corvo Knight, which is the bird-looking Pokemon. It looks kind of spooky. It looks kind of like maybe scary in a way. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. But that one is a steel and flying type. Actually, I think the way they wrote it, it's actually a flying and steel type. So very reminiscent of Skarmory. It'll be interesting to see whether this Pokemon is like the bird Pokemon of the generation. Usually every single generation has a bird Pokemon that you can catch early on, and that usually evolves twice. Usually. For example, Pidgey and Hoo-Hoo. I know Hoo-Hoo only evolves once. And then there was Pikipek and Fletchling, So usually every generation has a bird Pokemon. And given that they revealed Corviknight this early on, I do think there's a good chance that that this is the bird Pokemon. However, they did also announce that Corviknight would be like your transport in the game. So Corviknight can fly you to different locations in the game. So that reminds me of like the ride Pokemon in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Like for example, Charizard and Tauros. And those Pokemon were fully evolved Pokemon, or Pokemon that just didn't evolve at all, like Charizard, Stoutland, etc. That leads me to believe that, I mean, this is just completely baseless, but that makes me think that maybe Corviknight either does not evolve or is the final evolution, or maybe it just does not evolve, because I think it would be weird for them to have like a base level Pokemon as your flying Pokemon. Like for example, that would be like them having Pidgey as your flying transport Pokemon in the game, which again is hilarious because Pidgey is tiny, and if it were to carry you across the map, obviously that would be kind of funny, but I don't know. That's kind of random and kind of baseless, but the typing on this one's really cool. Steel and Flying is a very good typing competitively. You know, you look to Pokemon like Skarmory and more recently Celesteela, and those Pokemon have been really good in battles. Just defensively, they just take hits so well. Steel and Flying is just such an excellent type. If you think of Steel's weaknesses, fighting and ground, the Flying type kind of nullifies both of those. Of course, it's still weak to Electric and Fire, but the Flying typing kind of nullifies a lot of Steel's weaknesses. And then there's Wooloo, who I think is very cute. It's probably my favorite Pokemon that they revealed in this Direct, and I anticipate that I will have Wooloo on my team when the games come out. So far my team's looking like Grookey and Wooloo. Wooloo is a pure normal type. I imagine Wooloo is probably going to be like the Rattata or the Zigzagoon of the generation, which is usually like a normal type Pokemon that you can catch early on, that isn't that strong, but you can catch it early on, and it's a good Pokemon to have early in the game, but it gets a lot worse as the game scales. Wooloo in that vein reminds me of Bidoof. You know, they're kind of just cute and cuddly. I know a lot of people think Bidoof is very doofy, but I like Bidoof a lot. I think it's very cute. I think Wooloo is awesome, and I'm definitely going to have one on my team. And even if it ends up being kind of weak, I imagine Wooloo probably will evolve either once or twice, hopefully twice, but it would make sense if Wooloo evolves. Otherwise, it would be really kind of a random Pokemon because it's just a little sheep. But anyways, that's my thoughts on the Pokemon designs and typings for the first Nintendo Direct. I went a little longer than I anticipated, but I had a lot to say. Let me know in the comments what typings you think the two legendary Pokemon are, and also what was your favorite part of the Nintendo Direct announcement this morning? Which of the new Pokemon do you like the most? And again, I'm just going to say Wooloo is my favorite right now. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave a like if you did, and please subscribe for more Pokemon Sword and Shield content. The games are releasing in November, on November 15th, worldwide. We're currently in June, so that means we only have 5 months until the games come out. So I imagine we'll probably get more information on these games maybe in like a couple months, and that'll be like the midway point between now and November. But I'm really excited. I cannot understate how excited I am for these games. I hope you are too, and I hope you leave a like, I hope you subscribe, but we'll see you next time for more Pokemon Sword and Shield news.